We have been taught to think about retirement all wrong. And it took getting laid off at 51 for me to finally understand why. Because most people think the reward of retirement is money, having enough money, reaching your number, finally feeling financially secure. And don't get me wrong, money matters. I've spent plenty of time on this channel talking about healthcare costs and investments and living on a budget. Those things matter. But after a cancer diagnosis, a layoff, and time away from corporate life, I've come to realize the greatest gift of retirement isn't necessarily money. It's not having to deal with things that you don't want to deal with anymore. Think about that for a second. How much of adult life is spent dealing with things that you'd never choose if you didn't have to? People, meetings, workplace drama, deadlines, schedules, problems that aren't really your problems, but somehow became your problems. Most of us spend decades doing it, and we get used to it. We call it being responsible. We call it being an adult. But think about it for a second. How many times have you sat through a meeting and thought, you know what, this could have been an email? How many times have you listened to someone complaining about the same thing for the 100th time? How many times have you smiled and nodded because arguing just wasn't worth it? We've all done it. For 19 years, I worked at the same company, and towards the end of my career, I was an assistant vice president. And honestly, the work itself wasn't usually the hard part. Think about your own job. For most people, it's not the work itself that wears you out. It's all the extra stuff. The office politics, the gossip, the drama, the meetings that go nowhere, and the person who turns every small issue into a crisis. You know the kind of person I'm talking about. If you do, hit that like button. The one who can ruin your mood before you've even finished your first cup of coffee in the morning. Most of us deal with people like that because we need a paycheck. We have bills, we have families, we have responsibilities. So we put up with it. And after a while, we stop noticing how much of our day is spent doing exactly that, putting up with it or putting up with things. And that's what surprised me after retirement. Not the free time, not sleeping later, not having to commute. What surprised me was how much easier my days felt, because there were fewer things that I had to put up with. Think about that. When was the last time you had an entire day where nobody brought you their problem? Nobody needed an answer. Nobody wanted a meeting. Nobody wanted something from you. For a lot of people, that's pretty rare. And another thing retirement taught me is that being alone and being lonely are not the same thing. I think a lot of people mix those up. Have you ever heard somebody say, I'd go crazy sitting at home all day? Maybe you've heard it, or maybe you have even said it. But I've learned something different. Some of the best moments that I've had since retiring have been the quiet ones, drinking a cup of coffee on the front porch or going for a walk, reading a book, sitting in the backyard, doing absolutely nothing, and being perfectly okay with it. And the older I get, the more I appreciate a day that isn't complicated. A few years before I was laid off, I was diagnosed with leukemia, and I've talked about that in other videos. And if you've ever gone through a serious health problem or watched someone close to you go through one, you know it changes the way you look at things. You start paying more attention to how you're spending your time. You start asking yourself whether something is really worth the stress. You stop automatically saying yes to everything. That lesson stayed with me. Then the layoff happened, and suddenly I had more control over my day than I've ever had before. And one thing that I noticed pretty quickly was that some relationships changed. And maybe you've experienced this too. You leave a job and the phone rings less. The text messages slow down. The people who said, we should stay in touch, don't always stay in touch. After a while, you start realizing something. Some people were your friends, and some people were your coworkers. And there's a difference. And that's okay. The people who truly care about you usually find a way to stay in touch with you or to stay in your life. The rest move on. Think about how much of our lives are built around convenience. You know, you work together, you see each other every day, you're in the same building, and then one day, one of you leave and everything changes. Retirement has a way of showing you which relationships are real. And honestly, that's been a gift too. Maybe that's what we've been taught wrong about retirement. We think the reward is having enough money to stop working. And money is important. I'm not saying it isn't, but I think the real reward is simpler than that. It's waking up and having more control over your day. It's not having to sit through things that you don't care about. It's not having to spend time around people who make your day harder than it needs to be. It's being able to walk away from things that aren't worth your time. It's also being able to say no. It's being able to enjoy quiet afternoons without feeling guilty about it. After everything that I've been through, that's what retirement has taught me. Not a perfect life, not a stress free life, just fewer things that I have to put up with. And honestly, that's been worth more than I expected because I've come to believe sometimes life slows you down for a reason. Quieter seasons of life are where you finally hear what matters most or from who matters most. If you are retired or getting close to retirement, what's one thing you no longer have to put up with that you don't miss at all? Let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoy these honest conversations about retirement. If you do, hit that like button and I'll see you in the next video.